Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John McDougall. I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book in Houston. And before we get into tonight's event, I just wanted to make a couple of general announcements so that you guys know what is going on at the store. As we've mentioned multiple times, but somehow people still are not 100% aware, we are open. You don't need an appointment to come in. We're not limiting the number of people in the store anymore, so you're welcome to come in and browse. We do ask that you wear a mask when you're doing so. If you are interested in doing curbside pickup, we don't have the table set up outside anymore, but if you just give us a call and say, hey, I'm in the parking lot, can you run my books out to me? We're always happy to do that. We have, I think we are about done adding events to the 2021 virtual event calendar. There's maybe one or two more that I'm just waiting on a confirmation for, but we are pretty much done adding stuff for the rest of the year. We're going to be virtual for the rest of 2021. We've got our fingers crossed. We have a couple of things in the works for 2022 in January that we're hoping that are going to be in store, but we've got virtual contingency plans just in case those don't happen. But so definitely stay tuned for that. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be back with Lori Rader Day chatting with Amy Stewart. And then on Friday, we're going to be chatting with James Hahn Matson. He's going to be in conversation with Steph Cha. I'm super excited. Next Thursday is going to be the first event in our new every other month reading series with the crime writers of color and the queer writers of crime. So every other month, they are going to put together a panel of authors with different themes. This month's theme is going to be edge of your seat thrillers, and it's going to be hosted by Alex Segura and Kelly Garrett. If you checked out our underrepresented voices panel last month for Bouchercon, you know that they're great hosts. So we're super excited about that, and they've got a really great lineup. So definitely check out the website. That's going to be next Thursday, and then we'll be back with them one more time in December to wrap up the year. But we're super excited to have that going. Tonight, I'm really excited to chat with David R. Slayton and Greg Herren. I got to chat with David last year when White Trash Warlock came out. And when I realized that he and Greg both had books coming out on the same day, it's like, hey, let's do a panel together. And then one of the things I love about doing that is when you read the books and then realize that both of their books have so much in common. So I'm really excited to get into our conversation tonight. And while we are chatting, if you guys have questions for either author, either about their new books, writing process, any of that stuff, you can pop those in the live chat on YouTube or the comments on Facebook, and we will leave some time to get to those in a bit. But for now, I'm going to get us started. I'm going to bring David out first. How are you tonight, David?
I'm great. Thanks for having me back, John.
It's good to see you. Congratulations on Trailer Park Trickster.
Thank you.
So Trailer Park Trickster is the second in the series. And in case you guys are unfamiliar, David R. Slayton grew up in Guthrie, Oklahoma, where finding fantasy novels was pretty challenging, and finding fantasy novels with diverse characters was downright impossible. Now he lives in Denver, Colorado with his partner, Brian, and writes the books he always wanted to read. White Trash Warlock, Slayton's first book, was the first in the Adam. Do you say binder or binder?
Binder.
Binder series. In 2015, David founded Trick or Read, an annual initiative to get books, to give out books along with candy to children on Halloween, as well as uplift lesser-known authors or those from marginalized backgrounds. It's so funny, Joseph Fender, every time he comes to the store, every time before we, I've met him like a million times, and I'm always like, Joe, is it Fender or Finder? Because I know that it's Fender, but I always think that I'm going to get it wrong. So I ask him literally every time.
I did it because of the magic, binding. So yeah. Binding, magic, binding, binder.
And if you guys have not ordered Trailer Park Trickster or White Trash Warlock, we have signed book plates to go with them. We also have some Trailer Park Trickster swag. So I will drop a comment or a link in the comments in just a second if you guys want to order books. And next, I'm going to bring out Greg Herren. How are you tonight, Greg?
Pretty good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for doing this with us.
Good.
You were saying before we went live that you hadn't done many of these, and so it just seems impossible that we've made it through the entire pandemic, and this is the first time that I've interacted with you virtually.
It is. It is. Well, I didn't, like I said, I didn't have anything come out last year, and this is the first book I've had since Royal Street Réveillon in September of 2019, which is a really long time for me to go between books. I don't know how that happened, but it did. But I was actually kind of relieved because I don't like looking at myself. So
I'm in that moment right now, actually.
Really not really enjoying this a whole lot. But.
It's one of those things that like we all at the bookstore had to get over really quick because we were doing all of those when it first started. Before we started doing virtual events, we were doing the like recommendation videos. So it would be like, okay, I'm going to record this, and then I had got real quick, had to get used to like, I don't mind seeing myself, it's hearing myself that I hate. So I had to get over that really quick.
It's both for me. I hate the sound of my voice, and I don't like to look at myself. I really, really don't. And partly because I'm almost blind. I can't even wear contacts anymore. So when I can't get close enough to the mirror when I shave. So I always miss spots that I don't see until I'm at work later that day. And I'm like, oh, thank God for masks. Thank God for masks.
Right.
I don't think masks get enough credit for letting men get away without shaving as much.
Exactly. So Greg's newest book is Bury Me in Shadows, which also came out on Tuesday. Greg, I did not look at your bio beforehand, and I realized it's really long, so I'm going to kind of pick and choose as I read this real quick. So Greg Herren is a New Orleans-based author and editor. He's the co-founder of the Saints and Sinners Literary Festival, which takes place in New Orleans every spring. He's the author of 33 novels, including the Lambda Literary Award-winning Murder in the Rue Chartres, called by New Orleans the Picayune the most honest depiction of life in post-Katrina New Orleans, published thus far. He's co-edited a bunch of stuff. So actually, and we'll get into a little bit more of like kind of pseudonyms and all of that stuff. But a longtime resident of New Orleans, Greg was a fitness columnist and a book reviewer for Windows Media for over 4 years, publishing in the LGBT newspapers Impact News, Southern Voice, and the Houston Voice. He served a term on the board of directors for the National Stonewall Democrats and served on the founding committee of the Louisiana Stonewall Democrats. He is currently employed as a public health researcher for the New Orleans AIDS Task Force and served 4 years on the board of directors for Mystery Writers of America. As I mentioned while we were chatting tonight, if you guys have questions for either author, you can post those in the comments and we will get to them in a bit. But to get us started, let's start with you, Greg. Can you tell everybody a little bit kind of the elevator pitch for Bury Me in Shadows?
It's not your mother's lost cause Civil War ghost story. Let's put it that way. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. Sorry about that bio. That's also out of date, and it must be really. And if it's the one I think, it's the one from the back that they put in the back of the book. It's not the one. Yikes! I'm sorry. I sent you something. It's okay. Yikes! That thing is way too long. But yeah, it's based on an old family legend. When I was a little kid, my grandmother used to tell me all these stories about my family, both sides. And she was very entertaining. Crazy, but very entertaining. That was part of it, I guess. The crazy got old really fast, though. And I always wanted to write those stories. I always thought they were really, really interesting. And it wasn't until I was much older and started doing research that I realized, or read more and saw more movies and things like, oh, this is all stuff that you've stolen from books that have been published and movies that have come out. So none of this stuff is actually true. You were just entertaining me. And then I thought and then it occurred to me, it's like, well, I was also really young, so I might have missed something in the connection when she was telling me all this stuff. But it's a story about supposedly the way the story goes is my ancestors, the father and the two oldest sons went off to the war, and the two youngest sons and the mother stayed behind. And when the father and this oldest son were killed in the war, and when the other son who had gone to the war came back, the mother was dead. He just found her grave. The house was burned and the boys were gone, and they're called the Lost Boys. Yes, highly original. And and when I started actually researching the part of Alabama where we're from, and I realized that a lot of this stuff, she definitely was making all of this up or cribbing it from other people. Yeah. But they're very apocryphal stories. They're stories turn up all over the South. You'll hear they're in Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi, Tennessee. They all it's weird how they all came up with the same story about Yankee deserters killing people and all this burning out. And it's like, it was really the closest the Union Army came to where we're from. It's like an hour and a half drive now. So yeah, not very likely. They showed up on horseback. Not very likely. Yeah. But yeah, I'll shut up now.
That was good.
All right. I will keep rambling. So I
want to know, like, more, please.
Yes. So David, do you want to tell us a little bit about Trailer Park Trickster? And since this is the second book in a series, maybe kind of a little bit about the series for anybody who might not know Adam.
Sure. So in White Trash Warlock, Adam Binder, a broke gay witch from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I'm from, has to travel to Denver, Colorado, where I live now, to sort of rescue his estranged family from a terrible spirit that is threatening the city. Greg's just reading it now, so I'm going to try to avoid high spoilers, okay? Victory is had, but losses are incurred. It wasn't easy. And at the end of the book, Adam gets a cryptic warning calling him back to Guthrie. He's in a bit of a panic, so he just takes off on fire and doesn't tell anybody, including the guy he's just started a relationship with, who's kind of rightly pissed off about it. So Adam gets to Guthrie, finds out that things are much, much worse. The big bad that has kind of been haunting him for a long time is finally ready to reveal himself, and we get to answer the big mystery, who is the dark druid that has been killing Adam's extended family and that he's been hunting. At the same time, his love interest, Vic, who chases after Adam because, while he's angry, Adam needs him and he understands it, is on his way to Oklahoma, but his road trip is hijacked by Argent, the Queen of Swords, who, decides to take Vic on a lengthy detour through the spirit realm. And writing that was the absolute favorite thing I've ever written. Like, those two together are hilarious. And it's it all ends with a bang. So,
all right. So one of the things that's really interesting that I didn't realize when I set up the event is both of your books deal with characters coming back to the family homestead. I know, Greg, in your book, the character didn't necessarily grow up where he ends up in Alabama, but that's kind of where his family was. I thought it was really interesting that you guys are both kind of tackling family secrets kind of back at kind of where families began, and that the South and these small towns play such a huge role in these. And Greg, you've already talked a little bit about this, but could you talk a little bit more about kind of like why you wanted to tell that story?
Well, I've always wanted to write about, I didn't grow up in Alabama. As we say down here, that's where my people are from. Both sides of my family. My parents got married when they were still in high school. My mom was pregnant with me when she graduated from high school, and I have an older sister, Alabama. And but when I was 2 years old, they moved north. We moved to Chicago. So I actually grew up in the south side of Chicago, and then we moved out to the suburbs. And then I got transferred. My dad got transferred to Kansas. I lived in Kansas for 5 horrible years. And then I went to college in California. Then I lived in Houston, Tampa. I've lived all over the country, basically. And I've been in New Orleans longer than I've been anywhere. But Alabama is always, for whatever reason, is the home place for me. Whenever we talk about going home, my parents still refer to it as going home, going there. And I always feel tied. I've always felt very tied to it. My parents live in Kentucky now, and when I visit them, I have to drive through Alabama. It seems like I have to drive through Alabama to go anywhere, really. And every time, it just inspires me every time I drive through. It's such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful state. And the whole time I'm driving on the highway through there, I'm thinking of stories and stories and stories and stories and things I want to write about. And I've always wanted to write about Alabama. And I finally felt like I was ready. I've done some short stories, and I have a million ideas for stories and books and things set there. And I've kind of bounced around that part of Alabama a bit. One of my earlier books, the character was from there. My Scotty series, this is actually where Frank's nephew, who's in the series now, that's where he's from. But a lot of, you have to read everything I write and very closely to know how they're all connected together. And so I've always wanted to write about Alabama, and it was just the whole family secrets thing. It's absolutely amazing to me, the things you find out, because you think you know your family, and then you get older, and your parents get older, and then your parents start telling you stuff that they think you already know, and you're like, what? How many of your uncles went to jail? What? I had no idea. And so I wanted to play with that whole idea of even how from generation to generation things get forgotten. If you don't ask, I don't know what my parents' childhood was really like, other than what they've told me. I don't know what their parents' childhood was like. I don't know much about any of that stuff. And I kind of wanted to do that with this character. He doesn't really know much about his family because his mom moved him away to Chicago, and and he didn't grow up there. So he doesn't, and she hasn't really shared a lot of the family story with him. So he finds out all kinds of crazy things about his family that you would think you would know, but why would you? Like, I didn't know. I had an uncle who died. I didn't know that until I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
How do you not know you had an uncle that died?
Yeah.
But, I don't know. Anyway, but I will probably write more about Alabama. I'm primarily known for writing about New Orleans, obviously, because it's what I write about most of the time. But I'll write about Alabama some more. I will. I'll go back.
Yeah. And how about you, David?
Well, it's funny because my mom's side of the family is from Alabama, the Mobile area. So if we work hard enough, we'll probably figure out that we're related, which usually happens when I meet somebody from Alabama. I did the same thing to a large degree. Adam goes back to Guthrie, where I'm from, to the family homestead where I grew up. So I used a lot of my own upbringing and pieces. The trailer that is described in the book is the trailer that I grew up in. That's the place that I come from. And the time and the economics, so much of Adam's background is my background. It's interesting what Greg was saying, because I used a lot of the same stuff. My mom, about a year or so ago, before Warlock came out to visit, and Warlock was in the can, and I just started working on Trickster, and we were having similar conversations. My grandmother wouldn't talk about it. She had that Southern thing where she would not talk about it. And my mom and I began discussing it, and my mom said, "Yeah, you had a cousin who was gay. He was murdered when you were a year old, and it was quite a brutal murder and a cold case." So I wove in that into Trickster. I wove in some family history, very much like what Greg is saying. There's all these things people don't talk about and they don't tell you. My mom just passed away this summer, and there's this incredible amount of lore, or this incredible amount of information that was lost because I was gathering as much as I could from her, and she was finally ready to tell it. And it's unfortunate. I did a lot of research on my cousin James that actually is used in the book. And I found out that I had 3 gay cousins. I had James, Mervyn, and Joan, all who I never met. My family hid them from me and kind of erased them. And so I used this book as a way to sort of remember them and bring them back a bit. And that was nice. It was kind of healing. And then I found out, coincidentally, my cousin James on my mother's side is just utterly by coincidence buried in the same cemetery as my entire side of my father's family, where my father is buried. So it's this weird sort of, now when I go to take flowers to the Slaytons, I can take some flowers to James Mead as well. So that was cool. But if this book has one theme, it's no more Binder family secrets. All the family secrets that everybody's been holding on to, including Adam himself, finally get revealed, and they come out into the open. And while that causes a lot of conflict, especially with Vic, because Adam's holding back a couple of really big ones from Vic. And again, like I said, Vic is rightly pissed off. Mm-hmm. In the end, you see that it's healing. You see that it's right that these secrets get brought into the light, and we don't keep those things in the closet anymore.
So one of the things that you guys both also do in the books is that you use kind of the supernatural as sort of a way to like convey these secrets, and you both do it in very different ways, which is, again, like the books are David's is definitely more on the urban fantasy end, and Greg's is a little bit more kind of that cool, like Barbara Michaels, like kind of gothic-y. So it's really interesting to see how you guys are both doing something very similar, but you're doing it in different ways. What do you think that the supernatural kind of lends itself well to be able to kind of tell these kind of stories? Let's start with Greg.
It's so funny that you should mention Barbara Michaels. Have you been spying on me lately? Because that was exactly what I was trying to write. Like, I was trying to write a Barbara Michaels novel with gay characters.
You might have mentioned that maybe in the acknowledgments, I feel like, maybe, or like in somewhere like in the notes or something. Yeah.
Because Amy Come Home is one of my favorite books of all time. It's the best ghost story I've ever read. And I recently was telling somebody about it, and I said it was absolutely amazing how she could terrify you with just curtains moving in a lighted room. It's like, oh my God. But I think that for me, I know so little about the paranormal. I'm always a little nervous about writing about it because I don't really know a lot about it. I haven't really studied it. I've read fiction novels, obviously, but as opposed to nonfiction novels. But one of the things that the theme that Barbara Michaels returned to all the time is how the sins of the past cannot be resolved. They cannot be laid to rest unless, the situation is finally resolved. And that is a recurrent theme in a lot of ghost stories, I think. And that was why it was really important for me to do it this way. Plus there was really no way to figure. Anyway, I lost my thought. I'm sorry. I'm 60. I'm sorry. I forgot what I was going to say. But I like paranormal stories. I do. I love Barbara Michaels. I love ghost stories. I like that gothic feeling. That's what I was really trying to go for with this. And it just the story itself just loans itself to it. I mean, you can't have a burned plantation house out in the middle of the woods and a deserted plantation and Civil War stories and not have ghosts involved. Otherwise, what's the point? But I just always saw it that way. I originally wrote the story as a short story when I was in college, and knew when I wrote it in like 2,500 words that it was too much story for a short story. It was just a little vignette, a little piece, and that it was going to be at some point it was going to be a longer book. And I've always had it in the back of my mind that I was going to write this book one day. And I've just finally decided to do it. And it was very cathartic. None of the stuff in it having to do with the family stuff, none of that outside of the legendy stuff, none of that stuff is true. That's not my family. So if they're watching, that's not you. And, but I did borrow some reality. My mom had 3 brothers. His mom had 3 brothers. My mom's mother was widowed very young and had to raise the kids by herself. His grandmother was widowed very young and had to raise. It's the same part of Alabama that we're from. In fact, the area where I set it is where my grandmother actually lived. That's the actual property where I used to spend time when I was a kid. And so it just was always really spooky. When I was a kid, we used to always be terrified because, God, how old are we? How old am I? My grandmother used to always let us watch her stories in the afternoon and watch Dark Shadows. Yeah. And then, of course, we're out in the middle of the country and it's pitch black outside when the lights are out and all you hear is bugs and things moving outside, and it's absolutely terrifying. And I've never lost that. I still am afraid of the dark because of that. Right now I'm side-eyeing my windows. It's too dark outside. But there's just, I don't know. I kind of touched on the same things with an earlier book called Lake 13. And I was kind of afraid that I was writing the same book again, but it's not the same book. I mean, it's ghosts in the woods, but it's not the same. It's not the same story. And I'm always afraid when you're 33 or so books in, I'm always afraid, haven't you already written this?
Oh.
Which you have to look forward to someday, David.
So how about you, David? Why do you think that the supernatural is such a good vehicle for these stories?
So I love fantasy. I love epic fantasy, urban fantasy, all types. But one of the things is that always annoys me is if it's not deep, if it's just too shallow, or if the character's too overpowered. I get bored easy with those stories. And I think fantasy works well for me, like it's a really good dream. If it takes you out of reality, takes you somewhere else and gives you a mirror to look at reality and gives you a chance to see something deeper and then come back and bring that with you. It's kind of a very platonic idea, right? You come out of the cave, you have this wisdom, or even, following the heroine's journey or the hero's journey to go find knowledge and bring it back. I think good fantasy does that. For me, since I use a lot of darker themes like child abuse and all the stuff that Adam went through, which again is the rural background that I grew up with, and in a lot of ways, the stuff that's going on in the spirit realm and the elves that steal cars and all that is a way to lighten it, even though it has even larger consequences. Like there's the threat of global extinction that comes out in Trickster when one race of elves have had enough of us and decide humans just have to go. So, which leads to a whole other thing for poor Vic on his road trip. But I think the best fantasy transports us, but it doesn't just give us escape. It entertains us, but we come back with something, hopefully.
So since we're talking about kind of fantasy elements, Greg, you mentioned, you don't know a whole lot about ghosts. Did you do any research into like kind of any of the mechanics or the physics of ghosts or anything, or did you just like kind of wing it?
Many, many, many years ago, I wrote vampire stuff. And I was always afraid to write vampire stuff because there's so much vampire stuff. And I don't know anything about vampires. And then my editor actually told me, I said that to my editor because he was the one who wanted me to write a vampire book. And I was like, I don't know enough about vampires. I can't write anything about vampires. And I don't have the time or inclination to research it all.
Yeah.
And he said, Greg, they don't exist. Oh, okay. Yeah, that actually kind of makes a point. So no, not really. I tried to, for me, it was more about the feel, the tone, the atmosphere. That was what I was really concerned about, because my figure was, my character doesn't know anything about the paranormal either. So for him, and it's told in the first person. So for him, I see your cat. I'm afraid mine's going to do the same thing. So it's both of them.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't know anything about the paranormal. He doesn't know anything about ghosts. So it would be really weird for him to suddenly become a ghost expert at the age of 20.
Yeah.
So he doesn't know what's going on. And it's from his point of view. So you kind of don't ever, I never explain how it all worked or how it all happens. Maybe that was lazy, which is very possible. But I just don't, I think I didn't need to really come up with an explanation of how, a deep explanation. I just went with the whole mentality of spirits can't move on if things are unresolved. And there were a couple of times I think where I probably could have explained something a little bit better, but my editor thought I didn't need to because I asked, and she's, no, it's fine. And I've not had any pushback from people who've read it so far, but you always find out. So
it's always, I think it's always tricky to, when you have a character who doesn't kind of know what's happening, they're kind of discovering it as the reader is. And I thought you did a really good job of that, where you didn't feel like you don't feel like you're missing something because you're experiencing it as the character does, and the character doesn't know what's going on. And it's done in a way that you're just not like, oh, I wish I had some clue. Like, you're not supposed to know. And I thought you did that really well.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. I didn't. it was a lot of fun to write. It's very different from a lot of, I haven't written anything like this in a really long time. Like I said, the closest thing would be like 13, and that came out 10 years ago. Yeah. And the book that I have coming out in January is also very different from everything from everything else I've ever done. And it's getting to the point now where I don't want to go back to write the series.
Wow.
It's like I'm having so much fun with this other stuff, writing these other things, that I don't necessarily want to go back. I mean, the Scotty series is 8 books in. Yeah. I mean, I've enjoyed aging him. He was not going to. I'm way off base, off the original question now. See, I warned you. Like originally, Scotty was never going to age. He was always going to be 29, perpetually 29. And Hurricane Katrina happened. Yeah. And I couldn't pretend that it didn't. Mm-hmm. And so then it became fixed, and the series became definitely fixed in time instead of the amorphous now, which is what I always write in. Yeah. And so then now, and so it gets tricky because now he's getting older, and his thing, the key to him was always that he was young and pretty. Mm-hmm. And now he's not young and pretty. Well, he's still pretty, but he's not young anymore. But yeah, so I don't know. I forgot what the question was.
You got it. You got it. You got there.
Shut up. You answered it.
And how about you, David? You're as I mentioned, the books are kind of very different. So your paranormal and your magic system and all that's a lot more intricate. You pull in like with the elves and myths and things like that. So did you do any research as kind of a jumping off point, or did you just kind of run with it?
Well, I'm a giant fantasy nerd, and my own cat has heard us talking and has decided to wake up, and I forgot that he was in the office. So next time Greg's talking, I'll lock him out. Unless my partner rescues me, I might get lucky. But I'm a big fantasy nerd. I love Dungeons and Dragons. I play a lot of RPGs. But one of the things I don't like, kind of what Greg was saying, is when you heard a door open, I'm being rescued. When the magic system is too well defined, or when the magic system is too locked in, right? So there's some books I've read where they've charted every little spell, they've charted every little thing about the magical world, and then they lock themselves into rules that they can't easily break out of. So while I have a lot of material around it, saved up in notebooks and how the magic works and the world works, because again, I've been running Dungeons and Dragons games for 20 years, so I have a whole way of world building, and I cut my teeth on epic fantasy, so I know how fantasy worlds need to be constructed. I want to dole it out very carefully because I don't want to put myself into too many corners. Also, Adam doesn't know everything about the spirit realm. He's not as ignorant as, say, Vic, but his own knowledge is fairly limited. So he makes a couple of mistakes, or he makes a couple of assumptions, and some of those will come back to bite him because he thinks these are the rules of magic. He thinks that's how something works. I really liked what Greg said about them not existing, right? So if you work with a trope, like you work with something like the way that the elves work or the fae work, I like playing with tropes. I like twisting them. So just because one writer or someone established a trope doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Doesn't mean that the magic has to work the way it always did in the genre. I love one of the comments I got on my elves, which was that they would have Tolkien spinning in his grave. And that just makes me so happy. Yeah. I like that we're all getting the invasion of the cats tonight.
I know. They're just like all over the place tonight. Usually they're just like curled up on the floor, and tonight they're just like everywhere.
I'm usually really good about feeding him and finding, but he's got little hidey holes in the office because he's a bush cat. He likes to hide. So tonight he managed to sneak around me.
I keep hearing mine, but I don't see him.
Jump on your head in the middle of something.
Yeah.
Maybe the ghost cat of New Orleans.
Right. So Greg, you mentioned that, that Barbara Michaels was definitely kind of an inspiration for this one. Did you have any other did you pull from any other inspirations for it?
God, yes. Oh God, yes. When I was a kid, I loved Gothics. Like I said, I read all Mary Stuart, Phyllis Whitney, Victoria Holt. If it had a long-haired woman in a nightgown running away from a scary house, I was in. In. Daphne du Maurier. I love all those writers, and it really bothers me that no one writes like that anymore. Writes those kinds of books anymore.
We're starting to see some more. Like there are some people that are starting to kind of put their modern twist on it, which has been nice in the last couple of years. Like Ruth Ware is doing it really well. There's a book by Rebecca James called The Woman in the Mirror that came out last year that we love. So it's nice to see that some of that stuff's starting to bubble back up again.
Oh, great. That's good to know. Because I loved them, and I always miss them. And one of the things that I've always hated is that there weren't any queer ones.
Yeah.
There are a few. I found there are a few. Gaywick by Vincent Verga, and Divine Victim by Mary Wings, and which is amazing. And The Master of Seacliff by Max Pierce. But there's not really a whole lot of them. And it really surprises me because romance is so popular with queer people, or books about queer romance are really popular, I should say. And yet no one's really tied suspense into that. And it's like, well, romance is a big genre and suspense is a big genre. So if you write both in one, wouldn't that? But I don't know. But I really was hoping I was really hoping I would get one of those covers. I wanted him in a robe running away from the house.
With the hair flowing, of course.
No such. Maybe not.
You have to get Bold Strokes to do a variant cover for you. Comic books have variant covers.
That would be awesome. But yeah, I like My Cousin Rachel, Daphne du Maurier, and Rebecca. Obviously, I those are some of my favorite books. I love to reread books that I love, and I reread Rebecca every year. I reread The Haunting of Hill House. I kind of was a little bit on The Haunting of Hill House with this as well. I was trying to get that Shirley Jackson feel. I mean, if you're gonna rip somebody off, you might as well rip off Shirley Jackson,
right?
But that sense of the evil place, and that was one of the things that I tried to get across in the book that I don't think really came across as strongly as I would have liked, is that the place is evil. And I don't know if I brought that across as strongly as I would have liked to, but yes, I do. Right. I did come up with the entire family history. I did how the place became cursed, what the curse is all. Yes, I did do all of that. Yes, I did do all of that, even though I didn't use any of it in the book. I did come up with all of that stuff. And I keep thinking to myself, oh, well, you can write another Alabama book and use this part of it. And
well, it's definitely not a place that you would want to visit. I mean, it's not a place that you're like, oh, yes, I'm going to go on vacation there. So you definitely got that down.
Well, that's the thing I haven't, like my character, my grandmother hasn't lived there. She's deceased now, obviously, but she moved away. She left the home place because she couldn't live by herself anymore. And so she moved in with my parents. So nobody's really lived there for almost 30 years. And now if you do, I noticed they finally updated the Google Earth image because I can find the place on Google Earth and you can actually see the house still sitting there. And now when you look at it on Google Earth, the forest has come back and the house is gone. Oh. The forest has grown. And my mom told me that, the trees have grown up through the house, through the floors of the house and through the roof. So, and apparently I'm going to inherit it. I can't wait. 40 acres in the middle of nowhere, Alabama. Can't wait.
And how about you, David? What were some of the, like kind of urban fantasy touchstones that you were using when you were creating the series?
Well, so I use the other world element, like the spirit realm or the other side that overlays ours. And in book 2, we get to go higher up the chain I think of it as a spiral of all the worlds laying out. And Earth is kind of right in the middle. Adam sort of cheekily in book 1 describes it like a sandwich, that, you know, Earth is the meat, and then the elves live in the lettuce above because they're all earthy and vegan and annoying like that. He's got a whole thing about them. They get on his nerves. But what's nice is in the 3rd book, Deadbeat Druid, now we're going to get to go down.
Oh.
So in Deadbeat Druid, we'll get to see what's below. And so I get to kind of play with all 3 layers of the sandwich. And there are higher areas and lower areas that we won't be touching on because we only have 3 books. But for now, but give me more. I'll give you all the stuff you want. So it's kind of fun to play with that. But then like Greg, I really wanted to weave in a bit more of a Gothic location. Guthrie is beautiful. It's fascinating. It was the state capital for like 5 minutes before they came and stole the seal in the middle of the night and took it to Oklahoma City. So yeah, so it's Victorian houses and red brick streets, and it used to have trolley cars. It's a beautiful town. But I grew up in the scrub oak woods outside of it on the swampy end of the lake. And so when you think about Gothic locations, for example, there's a place in Guthrie called Dominion House. It's supposed to be one of the most haunted places in America. And when I was writing White Trash Warlock, one of the big themes for Adam is when he can start seeing into the other world and his sight is kicking in, his family thought he was mentally ill. So they put him into an institution called Liberty House. So I probably had heard of Dominion House, much like Greg was saying, these apocryphal stories seep in and hang out, but I completely forgotten it. So the book, again, is in the can. It's on its way to the printer, getting ready for release. And then somebody like, is this Dominion House something you know? Used to be a sanitarium, used to be a school. Bodies were found in the basement. Now it's a wedding B&B destination. But I'm like, is my own book just messing with me? Or like, so it's funny how these urban myths and things permeate, and in my case, rural myths, permeate and then ghost in. So I love urban fantasy, but it's often too urban for me. It's too LA, Chicago, really powerful wizard or demon witch throwing fireballs and, you know, doing big magic. I wanted something quieter, more creepy and rural. I wanted to make you afraid of blackberries, and I hope I did a good job of that in book 2. I wanted to make you afraid of certain little things like blackberry canes.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's interesting how there aren't a ton of, you know, like you said, kind of rural. Like, you know, Charlene Harris did it really well with the Sookie Stackhouse books. Nicole Peeler's Jane True books are a little bit more rural, but yeah, the urban fantasy tends to be, you know, way more, like you said, urban. So we have a couple of good crowd questions here. So Arlene wants to know, we're going to start with Greg. What's your most favorite and your least favorite part about being a writer?
My favorite part about being a writer is actually writing. I love to write. I would write all day, every day if I could. My least favorite part of being a writer is not being able to write all day, every day, because I wish that writers made more money. I guess that's my least favorite part of being a writer is I wish writers made more money, because we work very, very, very hard. And what we do is not easy. It's not something that anyone can do, just even though a lot of people think they can. And we just don't make enough money. I don't know how to fix that, and I'm sorry. Today was payday and I paid the bill, so I have money on the mind. So sorry.
It's a valid answer. I mean, people talk about that all the time about how, you know, or I see somebody recently say something like, you know, you buy a book and you get, you know, X hours of enjoyment out of it. And then you realize like this is an entire year of somebody's life that they put into this. So, I mean, that's definitely a valid, and especially because I know both of you guys both are writing, but you also have, you know, full-time day jobs that you're also doing. So you can write as well. Yeah. So how about you, David, least and most favorite parts?
I don't think I can follow that up with anything better. That's such an honest answer. One of the hardest things of publishing traditionally is wondering, will I ever be able to do this full time? Because I love it. I love playing with my imaginary friends. Hearing from readers is probably the most satisfying thing about it. I get emails from people. I got an email from a library in Veneta, Oklahoma, which is a ways from Guthrie, but they were stalking Warlock and it tagged me on Instagram, and we were chatting, and it just lit my heart up. And then I get emails from so many guys and people who grew up like I did, rural, usually gay, and saying thank you, or they're still in that environment. Like, I found your book, I was able to read your book, and I don't feel so alone. I feel like I've been seen, and I feel like somebody else has had this experience. Thank you for writing it. And I think it's the fear that I won't get to do more. I won't get to share these stories, because like Greg said, you write for hundreds of hours to create a novel, and you craft it and you work so hard at it, and it's tough. It's tough to be a professional writer. It's tough to be traditionally published. I love it. I absolutely am having the time of my life. I went to all the bookstores in Denver yesterday and signed all the copies that I could find of both of my books. Yay. It was an absolute blast. And my partner drove me. We had the most amazing time. My friends have all been posting pictures and showing it. And my heart could just explode. I'm so happy. And at the same time, there's this fear of, I love that I get to give you Deadbeat Druid in a year, but I hope I get to do more. I don't want that to just be, I hope it's not the end of Adam's story. I hope it's not the end of the stories I get to tell you. And I have so many books I want to share.
Yeah.
It won't be.
Yeah.
It won't be.
So for everybody watching, that is code for go pick up copies of them so we get more. Blackstone wants you to buy more so we get more of them. So kind of going with that and being able to want to do more, Arlene also wants to know, do you still have kind of a book or a genre that you want to tackle? I'm going to start with you, Greg, because you've written, as we said, you've written a bazillion books under a bazillion different names. Is there any other like genre or story that you want to tackle that you haven't done yet?
Oh, God, yes. God. Oh, my God. You can't see, but I have piles and piles and piles of file folders and notes and ideas. I will never write everything that I want to write. I can't remember where, somebody asked me recently, it could have been any time in the last 20 months, what was I working on? What did I have in progress? And I actually sat down and counted, and I was like, okay, I'm in the middle of, I'm writing 3 novels, 4 novellas, and I have 80 short stories in progress.
Wow.
And I'm doing an essay collection. And I keep getting more ideas all the time. I'm just scribbling down shit all the time. All the time. And I guess it's not.
I was worried it was going to be me that went first, Greg. Just
and so yeah, right now I have a book that's due on January 15th, and I haven't signed any contracts beyond that, but the 3 books I want to write, there's 3 books that I want to write for sure next year. And one of them is a Hollywood noir set in the 1950s about a closeted movie star that I really, really, really want to write that. And I started writing it, and I didn't know I was going to get this book deal with the January 15th deadline. That was going to be the book I was going to write this fall. So I was like 4 chapters into it and having the best time. I mean, when you can start a chapter with, I gave the guy with the big dick an autograph before I left. Or Big Dick Vic or whatever his name was. It's like, that was fun. I was having the best time. I'm having the best time writing it, because using that hard-boiled noir voice for a closeted gay actor who's very cynical, who's just a pretty boy who's aware that he's a pretty boy with no talent, and he's getting older, and he gets his jobs by, sucking off George Cukor. It's fun. It's a lot of fun, but at the same time, it was also a very scary time to be gay, even in Hollywood. And so dealing with all that is just, plus looking up, that research is fun. That research has been a lot of fun, looking up all the stuff about gay Hollywood and the closeted scene in the 50s and stuff. That's the one that I'm really dying to write. That's the story that I'm really dying to write. It's called Chlorine. Hopefully coming soon.
Awesome. And how about you, Adam? Do you have kind of a wish list of genres or things that you? I'm sorry, not Adam. I just called you Adam. David.
It's actually happening all the time now. Don't worry. Wow, I like to play in a lot of boxes. So I recently wrote kind of a romantic suspense. It's now morphing more into more of a thriller. So hopefully that'll be something Greg would enjoy when I get it out there. But fantasy is kind of always my first love. So I have let me start over. I have a urban fantasy spinoff to Warlock, which is out there. I hope that we get to do. I'd like to do more Adam books, of course. I have 2 more arcs planned in trilogies. I will promise that all the mysteries and questions from the first 3 books will wrap by the end of the 3rd book. Yeah. So you're not going to be left with those big overhanging questions because, authors change their mind about series and stuff. I don't want to leave people hanging. Certain authors will go unmentioned whose fans are like, please, where's the book? Or the series.
Who could that be? Who could that be?
I know, I have no idea. I have 2 epic fantasies out there that we're looking at. And I have a 3rd one. It's kind of the book that I want to write, but it keeps getting shelved as deadlines and contracts happen. It's Gay Tolkien meets World War I meets necromancy.
Oh, I'm in. I'm in. Write it.
Yeah, it's also my kind of personal title for it is the Sniper and the Prince. So it's got it's got a cool love story about a deserter, and it's funny because my friend James, it's like his book. Each of my books, I sort of have a friend in mind. Like, this is my ideal reader for it. And I feel bad because he's like, where is it? I'm like, you gotta wait, man. Other projects. I also tried a geeky gay rom-com that hopefully I can give you guys some news about soon. That's really fun. Speaking of Hollywood, it plays off of some of the stuff that playing out some of the different gay concepts and discussions happening in Hollywood, but more in the 2000s as opposed to the 50s.
Awesome.
I really wish that I mean, I love fantasy, I love science fiction. I wish that's something that I could write, but it's just not in my wheelhouse. I've tried and it's terrible.
I've got a space opera too that is just a lot of fun that I'm hoping that we'll get to show you someday. So my poor agent, every week I'm like, what about it? She's like, would you just, I'm just constantly throwing out a new genre and a new project at her.
So Jennifer wants to know about music. She said that she knows, David, that you have a book playlist. Are there certain songs that belong to a certain scene or character for you?
Yeah, so I create Spotify playlists for just every book I write, just about every book I write, I should say. For example, I've been working on something set in Greece, so I've been listening to a lot of Greek pop, which is kind of fun. It's very Euro pop. It's very different. And then for like Warlock, I have Spotify playlists that for each book. I think they're even public. And I have certain character playlists too. If I'm trying to create a certain mood in myself that fits the character's mood, I have songs so that, for example, Silver is a pretty big character and he's got a really interesting story and history. So when I'm writing about Silver, I go and listen to his playlist. I listen to the songs that like, this is what Silver's thinking or what he's feeling, and use that to kind of get myself in his head.
And how about you, Greg? Do you have playlists or is music part of your writing process?
Oh yeah. I don't create playlists. That's a little too technology for me. So I just discovered the magic of Spotify last year and I'm still figuring it out. But I listen to music when I write. It, for whatever reason, it takes me there.
Yeah.
And back in the day, what I used to do was I had a CD player that had a 5 CD thing. Mm-hmm. And I would just load 5 CDs by one artist, like Madonna, Whitney Houston, Fleetwood Mac, whatever, and then just hit shuffle and then sit down at the computer and start writing. And then I would notice the music stopped and like 5 hours had gone by. I was like, oh, I wrote a lot, didn't I? So music's very important to me. I love music. I have no musical talent whatsoever. I take a lot of inspiration from music. In fact, the title of this book kind of came from a song. it was originally called, the story was originally called The Ruins, and that's what I always called the book, the idea for the book all along. And then I decided I heard the band Perry's If I Die Young, then perform it on the Country Music Awards or something. It was the first time I'd ever heard it, and I really loved the song. And I looked up the words and it's like, ooh, Bury Me in Satin. That's a great title. Yeah. And then I realized it didn't really work as I was writing the book. Yeah. When I started actually writing the book, and I thought Shadows instead of Satin. That's the right title. So yeah, I get ideas from songs and stuff all the time.
So now I'm gonna say, obviously, I'm waiting for the Deborah Cox novel now.
Nobody's supposed to be here, Dave.
Nobody. She was just in town. She was just in town this weekend because they did like a little Houston like Pride block party, and she performed, but tickets sold out so quick I didn't get to go see her. I was very sad.
Oh, John, you're gonna hate me for this, but Southern Decadence here on Labor Day, she performed every Saturday on Bourbon Street for like 6 years, right on the corner where we pass out condoms.
Wow. Yeah, I do hate you a little for that.
I was in sweat distance. Beautiful.
Yeah. So David, Bella wants to know, what would be your favorite thing to do if you got to spend a day in the spirit realm?
Oh man. So the spirit realm is fun because I'm a historian. That's one of the things my degrees are in. Being a high school dropout, I have to make up for it by constantly going to college if possible. So I sit in front of a computer a lot, if the pastiness didn't indicate that. So the cool thing about my spirit realm is that it remembers, and dinosaurs might walk there. Buildings. So when Adam first gets to the spirit realm in Denver, he can see buildings that haven't stood in decades. So I do a lot of research on my cities. Like Denver's Chinatown is still present in the spirit realm. Most people don't know that Denver ever had a Chinatown. So I use it as a way to show history and to sneak in things that you may not know about it. And there's a lot of architectural games I'm playing with you in White Trash Warlock about Denver. A really savvy Denverite will figure out some of those buildings haven't been there for decades. And so is Adam, when he's actually going into that building, is he really there, or has he stepped into the spirit realm? It's a little bit of a psychological game I'm playing on the reader. And I think I just gave it up, of course. But a couple people. And so, for example, the watchtower, the clock tower gets blown up on the cover with the tentacles and White Trash Warlock. It's still standing here in the physical realm, but in the spirit realm, it's destroyed. So if I got to spend a day in the spirit realm, I would go and look at historical things. Like we talked about, I kind of wish I could go back and just look at the 1950s Hollywood, like actually walk it or see it. I joke all the time. There's that Great American Dad moment where they go back to the 70s and the wife is like, go to the bathroom, and the person taking her back in time is like, we got to get a move on. She's like, no, I'm not going back to that filthy decade without some Purell.
Okay, so since we are getting close to time, what is something that you have read lately that you love? Let's start with Greg.
Me first, huh?
Yeah.
I read everything I've read this year has been amazing. Absolutely amazing. I've read so many good books this year. It's actually kind of intimidating. But and I'm gonna get the name wrong, and I can't remember her name. But The Other Black Girl. Oh my God, I love that book. Oh my God. And I'm trying to see it. I can't see the table next to my chair.
So The Other Black Girl is Zakiya Dalila Harris. It's so good. Yeah,
so good.
Yeah.
And Allison Galen's new book that's coming out in November next month, The Collective, is amazing. And Megan Abbott's The Turnout. Mm-hmm. You Can Never Go Wrong with Laura Lippman. Yeah. And Dream Girl, I think, was the most recent one. Mm-hmm. And of course, Sean Cosby. Yeah. Razorblade Tears, anything by Kelly Garrett or Alex Segura, Steph Cha. Oh, I could go on forever. Yeah, I wish I could read all day.
Yeah.
I wish I could get paid to read all day.
Yeah. And so for those of you watching, so like definitely check out Greg's blog because he talks a lot about the stuff that he's reading and enjoying on there too. And he's always got great crime read recommendations on there. How about you, David? What's something you've read lately that you've loved?
So the book that I keep coming back to is A Friend in the Dark. It's by C.S. Poe and Gregory Ash. They co-wrote it. C.S. Poe does really amazing, quirky characters. She has her great steampunk series, Steam and Magic, which has a gay federal agent chasing and kind of falling in love with a Wild West outlaw called Gunner the Deadly. So it's very pulpy, very fun. And then she co-wrote Friend in the Dark with Gregory Ash, who writes very gritty, dirty cop, gay cops, trying to solve crimes. And then they wrote this book together. And so you've got that very gritty, awesome characterization that Greg writes, where I don't like a lot of his characters, but I want to see where they go. And then I really love C.S. Poe's characters. And when you take those two tastes and blend them together in New York, where New York then becomes, we've talked so much about setting tonight, I feel like, then New York becomes this third character, this important setting. So that series is the one that's haunting me the most, and they need to get the third one out there. So if you two are watching or hear this, get on it.
She's really sweet. I've met her. She's really sweet. We were on a panel at BioShockCon, I think.
Yeah. Also wanted to throw out for any urban fantasy fans that are out there, I'm going to throw out a book recommendation from me, but J.T. Ellison has just co-written an urban fantasy under the pseudonym Joss Walker, and it's called Tomb of the Queen, and it's excellent. It's about a librarian who finds out that magic and like werewolves and all that stuff is real, and gets recruited by the CIA to track down magical manuscripts in Ireland. Ooh, she's been a big urban fantasy fan for years and had wanted to try it, so she teamed up with another writer to write it, and it's fantastic. And I think there's a second one coming out next summer. So that's Joss Walker's Tomb of the Queen as well. So actually, I wanted to ask you too, David, before we go. So cars play a big part in the book. Are you a car guy too?
Oh man, I get asked this question today. I am actually not. So Adam's Cutlass Supreme from 1977. I will reveal the secret of why Adam drives this car. Because the guy I had a crush on in high school, who was my neighbor, had this exact car and would wash it in his cutoff jean shorts. And it's stuck in my little teen brain like nothing else. I know nothing about cars. I'm terrible with them. I can put air in the tire and oil, but that's about it. Yeah, no, I'm not a big car guy. But if I had stupid money, like if I just had stupid money, I would buy Adam's car. Though I would probably just never drive it, and it would just sit in the driveway.
It's always the cutoff jean shorts, isn't it?
I'm not going to name him. He might see this someday.
That's the best car answer to an answer to a car question I think I've ever asked. So I'm glad I snuck that one in there.
Yeah, no, do not. I have no sense of direction. Adam has a sense of direction, and he knows about cars. These are things that he did not get from me.
Awesome. So I think on that note, that is going to do it for us for the evening. So just to recap, if you guys have tuned in late, once we are done chatting, Facebook and YouTube will archive the chat so you can rewatch it. If you want to hear more about White Trash Warlock, you can check out the YouTube channel and see our chat with David from last year. But we have been talking with David R. Slayton, whose book Trailer Park Trickster, which is the second in the Adam Binder series, has just come out. As I mentioned, we've got signed book plates and some swag to go with it. And we've been chatting with Greg Herren, whose recent release, Bury Me in Shadows, also just came out on Tuesday. We've got copies of both of them in store. I hope that if you have not picked them up elsewhere, you will visit murderbooks.com and order from us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. And I'm so glad that I got to do this with the two of you. This was so much fun. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having us. This was fun.
It was fun. It wasn't nearly as painful as I thought it would be.
Good. That's what we aim for. Not as painful as you expected. So good. So you guys,
I guess that goes with the murder theme.
Yeah. Y'all have a good night, and we'll see you soon.
You too, John. Thank you. Nice meeting you, David.